We were afraid. Not only me, but also the progenitor, my mother. We both had zero doubts about what we were feeling. Fear, or even dread. Dread? Yeah, that could be the best way to describe me at the moment, when those cold and terrifying footsteps, as if they were from a giant, got closer and closer to our refuge. A room we were in, with a door locked and being in the farthest area from which we were. Being wrapped in a hug, my body felt the heat, and at the same time, the panic coming from who I owed my entire existence. I did not know why, but that mare. The only time I saw her before locking ourselves in simply had an expression that reflected some, if not all, her deepest desire, wanting to see us lying on the floor without any sign of life in our bodies and souls. Then a crash followed by a cracking of wood in one act caught our attention. As soon as our eyes had located the origin, we observed how an axe tried to penetrate the door. A blow made by the weapon. A piece of wood went flying. Immediately, I felt my mother grab me under her hooves and hurried me to the window. Moonlight passing through said object was visible before my eyes, letting me see some of the brightness among all the darkness that surrounded me. With a quick movement, the mare who for these last years had sheltered me from her hooves pulled me out the window, causing me to feel a refreshing night breeze that little or nothing managed to calm my feeling of horror. Before I could say anything to her, the mare reached out her hooves and threw those of her own full into the darkness of the night, while I was screaming uncontrollably. I fell several meters until the branches of a somewhat small tree attended my arrival, softening what could have been a fatal fall. For an instant, I did not pay attention to the fact that I seemed to be safe. My own body could not notice the branches as I had been prepared for the end. Nonetheless, as a couple of seconds passed, I slowly opened my eyes and saw myself above the aforementioned tree. Instantly, I hurried my body to be able to go down and see what was happening above me, but a knock on what I assumed was the door and a scream from my mother made me clear that she was in even more danger. I started yelling in despair as tears fell from my eyes and her name came out at full volume from my mouth. Anguish, pain, and sadness are words that will not fail to describe the way of expressing what I have felt deep within me. Nevertheless, a seemingly prolonged silence gave me the hope of everything going well, but one last blood-drowned scream made me realize that she was gone. Forever. It was there that an impulse finally took its place. I had to run as far as possible and get away from the one who had eyes so empty like a moonless night. Then, those same eyes became the first thing I saw when my consciousness finally returned to being full. I ran without thinking. Minutes passed, perhaps even hours while I ran aimlessly. My soul still feels for having passed through many houses, pubs, stores, and even a police headquarters, but fear did not allow me to think rationally, so I continued running for another long time until my legs started to feel like spaghetti in boiling water. I fell headlong, hard. The first thing I felt was my nose being broken after a forceful hit against the asphalt, and as soon as my head turned back, I was left in the middle of screaming after seeing that an axe flew straight to my face. Once again, I opened my eyes. A mix of exhaustion, hyperventilation, and terror had become palpable inside me the moment my body finally woke up. My breathing had become agitated, as the fear I possessed remained. A cold sweat ran down my face on both sides, while my gaze traveled tirelessly around the boutique's room. With a sigh of relief, it felt like divine luck that I realized everything that had happened was just a terrible nightmare. One of the worst I'd ever had, or so I believed myself. With calm taking fear's place, I closed my eyes as a slight ironic laugh escaped my mouth. This was a moment that I really needed and was more than grateful to have it for once. However, a creak of wood caught my attention instantly, causing my fears to rise from the ashes again. The fearsome noise of more wood creaking made me understand that it had not only been my imagination playing a practical joke on me, but that I was actually in the room with somebody else who was more than clear on not having good intentions. Therefore, little by little, I tried to crawl away from there in any way possible, pushing myself mentally to keep my mind as sane as possible, but a stick belonging to an axe just prevented me from doing so. My eyes observed, frightened, as the object levitated in a blue aura in front of my throat. This one being pulled by said magic, it took me with it. I attempted to yell, but failed on doing so as my oxygen was off-hoofly cut and prevented from getting out of my throat. For the last time, tears came out of my eyes and surrounded my cheeks at the moment the weapon pulled at a point it made me fall from the bed. I almost managed to escape, but the axe still had me trapped, taking me into the impregnable darkness from which I would never emerge alive. Then, as my tearful eyes closed, a female voice whispered, "Sweet dreams, sweetie."